Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. Our children are our future. That's a fact that every nation on earth can agree on. So how's the U.S. doing in raising and educating our future generations? The Department of Education is scrapped. So how are school districts teaching, teacher quality, and scores faring? Well, team, get your number 2 pencils out because we're going to get the basics together from that Patriot teacher herself, Kristan Whann. Kristan's well known online as that Patriot teacher. She's an educator, commentator, and advocate for American values in education. She's gained a healthy following due to her passionate discussions on history, civics, and current events, inspiring students and viewers alike to think critically and engage actively in their communities. Kristan combines her classroom experience with a bold, unapologetic voice, making her a recognizable figure in the conversation about education, patriotism, and civic responsibility. Kristan, my paper and pen are ready. Thank you so much for being on Politically Basic today.
Hey, I'm honored to be here.
All right. Well, we want to know about you. Tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you kind of came to be a popular figure on social media as that Patriot teacher.
Yeah, that actually started in 2021. I had no actual following on social media at the time. I was just seeing a lot of gender ideologies and very confusing messages within curriculum, and a lot of parents actually complaining about it. So I decided to do what I think a lot of teachers are afraid to do. And I took to social media. Like I said, I had 0 followers at the time. I created my first TikTok account and I got on and I said these words. I said, it was actually a hypothetical statement. If teachers are allowed to teach gender ideologies and confuse kids, then I, as an elementary educator, should also be able to teach them that they are a boy or a girl, that they were created a boy or a girl on purpose and for a purpose. And while that brought in a lot of support, it also brought in a lot of attack. And the left viciously went after me, doxed me, harassed me. It was quite a vicious attack. I did not even realize that these people existed. So it was very shocking for me. But what it did was it told me that we are in such a spiritual battle. And what was meant to silence me actually lit a fire in me. And it caused me to say, you know what? This message is important. And so I haven't stopped running my mouth since.
Well, I like to hear that because what you have to say is really on point. And, you're kind of breaking down the sort of contemporary issues that kids are dealing with in the educational system, that teachers and parents and adults are experiencing too. So are you a teacher in elementary education currently?
Yes, currently I am teaching at a Christian private school, which is new for me. I was in public education prior to that, so it's been quite refreshing and quite a culture shock. But yes, I'm teaching elementary, 4th grade and 5th grade.
Oh, good. What's been the biggest difference that you've seen maybe in the culture of the school going from public to private there?
I think the biggest adjustment for me was redefining my purpose as a teacher, because in the public education system, sometimes you're the only consistent person in a child's life, and the parental support just isn't always there. And so I felt so needed. And then I get to private education and I'm like, these kids are so academically advanced. They have parental support. So what is my purpose here, And so at that point, I realized, my purpose is just as meaningful. It's just a lot different. In public schools, you're working to fill gaps because kids don't have that support. Whereas in private schools, there's a very strong family environment family involvement.
What a good point to bring up, really, that we don't think about that often. That, we see kids sometimes at school or out, and we just never know what they're dealing with or what's lacking in their lives. And adults can have such a powerful impact in so many different ways. So I thank you for being a teacher. That's not always easy. Even when you're at a private school or a private religious school, there are always challenges. So I thank you for your service in that sense. We stick to basics here, Kristan. So let's talk about the U.S. educational system. It's pretty vast. It's got a lot of moving parts, so it's not a really simplistic conversation. But I'd love to have you break it down for us. Can you give us just a basic overview of kind of the educational system in the United States today, how it's doing, and what our biggest challenges are?
Okay, sure. So one of the biggest challenges is disciplinary issues in school. If you talk to any teacher right now, they are going to tell you that they feel like they cannot do their job because they are busy putting out fires in the hallway all day long. Wow. Disciplinary issues are out of control, and teachers are miserable as a result because they were not trained to be behavioral interventionalists, okay? They were trained to teach, and they just want to do their job. But instead, we have students returning right back into the classroom after violent outbursts. I'm telling you, we don't have enough time to explain how many teachers I know personally that have been assaulted by their students. And that student gets put right back in the classroom because the system is failing. It's not just failing our students, it's failing our teachers. A lot of political agendas are being infiltrated in curriculum. You have the newer, I guess you could call it the newer generation of teachers that are literally being trained to be political activists in the classroom. That's why when you log onto TikTok, you see teachers very proud, loud and proud, all over TikTok talking about their gender ideology lessons, and confusing the minds of kids. Whereas we should be focusing on, like you said, basics, reading, math, teaching kids how to think critically. There's a lot of agendas being pushed. I feel like it got worse post-COVID. And so we need to get back to that. We need to get back to holding kids accountable. We need to get back to teaching. Like, it's that simple. Unfortunately, even teachers that are wanting to teach are struggling because of the extreme behavioral issues that they're having to deal with.
You're really connecting some pretty important dots here, and I want people to understand what you've just sort of unlocked. And that it's what we're seeing in the failures of the criminal justice system when dealing with adults, and what we're seeing with the failures of a judicial system in not holding criminals and lawbreakers to account with regard to adults. That's happening in the early educational system. That's where it's starting. Kids are being radicalized and having these ideologies, injected into their day-to-day experiences there. But they're also not having consequences for doing things that are outside of the boundaries and the guidelines of a school environment. They're not getting in trouble. So why would we expect that they would leave, elementary, middle school, high school, and think that the world is going to be any different? And it's not. And we just have this terrible, cycle happening, and it really is generating there. So I think that's remarkable that you're able to understand that is a huge issue that I don't think a lot of people understand. So I'm really glad that you're talking about that. What a concept, right? Let you do the job that you're trained to do and not just be like, bouncers and bodyguards and narcs all day long. Good Lord. Well, let's talk about those standards too, because while everyone's so busy breaking up fights and trying to get these kids to pay attention, the standards are slipping a little bit because I think the stats are not there, right? So what we have here, let's just break it down for everybody. So states set their own academic standards, but 41 states recently adopted Common Core standards. And then we have the Every Student Succeeds Act that replaced No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was well-intentioned. It just didn't go well in practice, right? But this is giving states more control over testing and accountability. But how do you think that's going? You're boots on the ground and you're in this every day. How are those standards working?
They're not. They're not. They're not working. I'm telling you, if you could see the decline, especially post COVID. I say post COVID a lot. We've seen that high school seniors are at historic lows. Only about 35 proficient in reading and 22% proficient in math. Obviously, the curriculums that are being placed in the schools just aren't working. And I think I had a huge eye opener to that when I went to private education, and I'm seeing these kids. They are just so academically high. It was very shocking to me. But the curriculum, we're not stuck having to use curriculum that's coming from. I'm assuming school boards are putting together these curriculums without asking any teacher opinions. How about we ask teachers, what do you think your kids need? We're given these curriculums. We're told to follow these scripts. This is in public education, and it's just not working.
How sad. When we were kids growing up, there was always this threat. I mean, first of all, you had the threat of being in trouble with your parents if you didn't do well in school, right? That was like pretty pervasive, you know. They set their own standard in the home. But also there was sort of this like social stigma of being held back. Being held back or having to take summer school if you did poorly in your studies was probably the worst thing that could happen to you as a kid. Is that even an option now? Are kids just moved forward if they're not, testing at a certain level, if they're not getting certain grades? Or are schools and districts just moving kids through the grades regardless?
Yep, they're moving them through, and then the teacher that gets them is expected to move mountains, because educators at the end of the year have to show growth for every student in their classroom, or they should show growth. So we're holding educators accountable to showing growth, but we're giving them students that are just being passed along. So a lot of teachers in that regard just feel completely defeated. But yes, and it's an injustice to not just the teacher, not just the student, but the teachers as well. So it's a major injustice. A child who can't read by fourth grade should not move on to fifth grade and move on to sixth grade. And that just creates this vulnerability in their life. Kids that are struggling academically, we see it statistically in adulthood. It leads to very risky behaviors. So we need to meet kids where they are. And if a child needs to stay back, they need to stay back. But that's not what's happening.
Yeah, it does such a disservice to the child. It's one thing if you don't fully grasp history or science or math. That's unfortunate and that's not the goal. But when a child can't read, they don't have much of a future here or elsewhere, right? It's just a huge door shut and on their pathway to their future. And that is so critical that we're helping them do that. It's sad to see us go backwards in that way. But let's talk about some of the scoring statistics here. So in our country, we use the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, which is the main nationwide measure of K through 12 student achievement. So subjects are given a score. So let's talk the most recent full set of statistics that we have, which would be from 2022. I wish those were a little bit more updated, but c'est la vie. So eighth grade reading scores went down, and eighth grade math scores were categorized as seeing a significant decline. Math actually saw the steepest drop in NAEP history in 2022. Only 26% of eighth graders were proficient in math. And then fourth grade, which you were just mentioning, which is such a marker in that grade, fourth grade reading saw a decline, and fourth grade math scores also categorized as seeing a significant decline. And then we can talk about this on an international scale. How do our educational institutions and our student scoring and testing, how does that rank on an international scale, right? Because America, we're supposed to be doing okay, right? We're civilized, okay? So we have an international comparison score called the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment. This tests 15-year-olds in over 80 countries. So let's take a look at some of those scores really quickly, and then I want to get your take on that. That the U.S. score for reading was a 504, which is above average, so that's good internationally. A 499 in science, so slightly above average, but a 465 in math, which is below average internationally. Do you think that's going to continue going in the not great direction, or how are we doing internationally here?
I think it's eye-opening because we have more resources than any other country, and yet our kids are failing, So I think it goes back to the DOE. I think teachers unions and the Federal Department of Education have way too much control in our classrooms. We are protecting underperforming teachers, pushing political agendas. And I think, Trump getting a lot of backlash for wanting to dismantle the Department of Education. But he's really just trying to scale back federal overreach and the union's influence, which in wanting to restore basically power to parents and local school boards and teachers who want to focus on education. We want to teach. Most teachers in the system, we want to see our students grow, but we're giving these scripts, these scripted curriculums that just aren't working. And nobody's sitting down and asking the teachers, what do you think your students need? And I think that's a huge problem.
It is. And, it's really kind of easy when you look at the landscape of, you mentioned resources, and you can see where the cracks are, right? So the U.S. spends about $15,600 per student per year. That's K through 12. It's one of the highest in the world. But then you're seeing our international rankings drop. The fourth graders can't read. The eighth graders are really in a bad place. And so let's talk a little bit more about what President Trump did. You're right. He did receive a lot of backlash for, I believe that was Linda McMahon, who said, we're going to shut down the Department of Education because they were being funded. And it was almost like just an intermediary that then took those federal funds and said, well, we're going to slap on all of this, curriculum, all of this ideology, all of these, markers that now get trickled down to the districts and the teachers. Am I right in that? Am I on track? Is that what was happening? Because it seemed like it was just kind of like a money funneling system, and it wasn't translating down to any benefit at the end of the day to the teachers and to the students.
No, you're absolutely spot on with that, 100%. Yes, it's not benefiting the teachers. And I think that was Trump's heart behind it all. Is it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that it's not working. What we're doing is not working. We're putting all this money into all of these resources, and our kids are failing. So what needs to happen moving forward? What do we need to do? I do believe we need to give more power to parents, to local boards, and to teachers. I think, even just as a teacher in the public education system, it was not uncommon for us to be given a curriculum. Okay. And you could tell the school board didn't read this curriculum because it was full of inappropriate, not age appropriate content. I'm like, who's monitoring this? Who's reviewing this? And so I didn't feel comfortable teaching that type of curriculum. So here I am having to spend hours before I teach each day filtering out a bunch of junk because I teach fourth graders, So I think it's a huge issue. I really think that sitting down with teachers and asking them, what do your students need, would be critical to improving our education system.
Yeah, 2020 gave us a little bit of a gift in the sense that with all of this teaching going on via Zoom, some of the parents for the first time were able to hear a little bit more from the teacher, a little bit more of what this curriculum included, and some of it wasn't good. And now we have people like our friend Pastor John Amanchukwu, who goes and reads the materials back to the school board, and they are pornographic. There's no other way to say it. They're talking about sex. They're talking about masturbation. They're talking about how to get someone turned on. And this is for little kids. I mean, you teach 9 and 10-year-olds. Like, think about a 9-year-old child hearing about, some of these things. I don't want to even say all of the terminology, and we're two very grown adults talking about this. And the school board's reactions have been so interesting, haven't they? They can't stand to listen to it. They try to get it shut down. They're trying to cut mics. They've got, Pastor John has been arrested a couple of times. We just saw, thank God for social media in some respects, we just saw a video of somebody confronting a school board regarding boys in the girls' locker room, and those 2 women started undressing in front of the school board, and they're like, please stop. And they're like, what is the problem? You're subjecting our young minor girls to this, but you don't want to see it happen in front of you. It's completely hypocritical and it's outrageous. And it really is one more thing that gets dumped onto your plate as a teacher, that you're now having to not just deal with behavioral issues and not just deal with kids who might be having struggles outside the classroom or at home and trying to care for them and get them to focus, but now you're having to filter curriculum at every step. I mean, these teachers are like superheroes, the good ones like you. This is so much. And then on top of that, now we have this other element of mental health issues for kids because they're on devices. Good Lord. How's anybody a teacher anymore?
Right.
I mean, what else? I don't know, girl. Like, I don't even know how you're doing it. What's the fix here? How do we fix this?
I have been praying because I really feel like it's such a spiritual battle. You look at the 10 Commandments in Louisiana, and just it was an eye opener for me. The cultural it was a picture of the decline in our culture. Whenever we have kids vandalizing school property, we have kids drawing graphic pictures, for lack of better words, on bathroom stalls, okay? But you guys want to go to court and sue Governor Landry for wanting to put up the 10 Commandments, for wanting to have some type of, ethical code on the wall. It's just beyond me. Because when we do try to put something good in the classroom and restore some sense of morality, there's extreme backlash.
Can you give us an update on what's going on there? Now, you're in Louisiana, and there had been, was this an executive order from your governor? How did it come down the pipeline to have the 10 Commandments posted in schools and in classrooms?
Yeah, it was an executive order. He actually just wanted it as a historical document. We have the 10 Commandments right outside of our Capitol. So he's like, this is cultural literacy. This is moral education. The 10 Commandments, they give kids an understanding of the ethical roots of American culture, which I believe is very true. But it ended up getting deemed unconstitutional. Federal court blocked the law and basically saying that it was trying to establish a religion, which is not true. A poster cannot establish a religion. So it didn't end up passing, but it just goes to show you where we are as a society when we're going to fight against something that would restore some sense of morality in the classroom.
Well, it's so illogical when you think about it and break it down, because the 10 Commandments are part of an established religion that established this nation and our Constitution and all of our founding documents. So I'm not sure how they're trying to carve out the 10 Commandments and separate it from every other document that influenced the laws of the land, including the laws of Louisiana and whatever, school district is within. So it's really interesting. I do hope that it continues to move up the legal pipeline and legal chain to get a better ruling than that, because I don't know how somebody can justify looking at a list of the 10 commandments and say to school age children, no, we want the opposite of this, so we're not going to post it, but we'll keep tracking. And thank you for giving us an update there. Just post pandemic, how do we course correct in education? The pandemic was such an isolationist time, and I think that was very purposeful, that we lost community and that parents lost connection with kids, those in school too. And how do we get back? I'm hearing a lot of issues that seem to be stemming from maybe a home environment or a family environment. What do you think about that?
I think that has a lot to do with it, and teachers can't fix what's going on in the home. So it comes back to parents being involved with their children, dads remaining in the home. Charlie Kirk, I'm just being reminded right now, he spoke a lot about the effects of fatherlessness. Yeah. And that's what we see. It wasn't very uncommon for every student in my classroom to be from a broken home. And you would see the effects of that academically. And that's just something that teachers, as much as we pour into our students and as much as we work with them, yes, we can bridge some gaps, but we can't fix what's going on in the home. So there really needs to be restoration in the home. I do believe that the best way to fix pandemic learning gaps is, it's not that simple, but I think we could help move in the right direction if we begin focusing on basics, reading, writing, math, providing tutoring, small group instruction, and like I said prior, giving parents and local boards more control, holding schools accountable, holding students accountable, because behaviors post-pandemic has been absolutely insane. And we're seeing a teacher shortage because of it. If you teachers are not leaving because of the pay. We didn't get into it for the pay. Teachers are leaving. If you ask 95% of them, they are leaving because of disciplinary issues and the lack of support surrounding it.
Right. And if you think about it, this is the group that is educating future teachers. So if we don't get it sorted out, then you're going to have the result of this environment in our educational system now being instilled in teachers who are going to teach the generations after them. So it's a really bad cycle. And that's certainly not to say that, teachers aren't doing a good job or that they're going to be bringing up, students who aren't going to be effective teachers. It's just not the best. And we want people who have a heart for this, and it's not easy. Even when you do have a lot of resources, or you are at a, great school and the kids are doing well and they have a more stable home life, it's still really hard. And so to encourage people to want to go that path, and it takes a lot of schooling and studying to get your licensing and get your credential to be a teacher, and then to go into that environment with not a lot of pay, we've got to do a little bit better to improve the outcomes and incentivize great teachers to go through that process and end up in the school system. So I'm with you there for sure. And I hope that we can implement some of these changes. I think you're absolutely right. It's got to start with the home environment the best that it can. We know that that's not a perfect system all the time, but Kristan, this is so interesting to hear from you because you've had your head in this and you speak about this quite often. And you're also getting a lot of feedback in terms of comments and posts and things on social media. I think that's a very valuable aspect of social media, is that you're getting to interact with people a lot. What's the one thing that you think people get wrong most frequently about our educational institutions and systems here in the United States? And then what's the one thing that you wish you could tell everyone all the time?
I think I want most people to know that the majority of teachers that get into the profession, they get into it for the right reasons. I think because we have seen so many far left ideologies being pushed, that there's this assumption that all teachers are, these raging liberals that are trying to indoctrinate your kids. And that is happening, but it's not the picture of the majority of teachers. So I also come in defense of teachers in that way, because I know that there's so many amazing teachers that just want to teach and they feel so exhausted, and they want to do what they love. They want to educate kids, and they show up every single day at a very thankless job, and so I just want people to know, majority of us, we're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah. Well, that is so good to hear, because sometimes all we see are the ones railing with all the different colored flags behind them, and they've got the piercings and the multicolored hair, and they're talking about how excited they are to talk about sex with your children. Or there have been teachers who have come out and said some really vile things regarding the Charlie Kirk assassination. That's been very difficult to see. And we've also seen those teachers, those female teachers, unfortunately, who have had really inappropriate relationships with young boys, middle school and high school boys. And it shocks us, but we have to remember that we're seeing such a teeny tiny fraction of a percentage of teachers who are out there across the entire nation of probably hundreds of thousands of teachers that are in it for the right reasons, that do care about your kids. And we have to thank them more. Just like we were just talking about, with someone who's a former Marine and Secret Service, how much we have to remember our law enforcement. It's the same situation. We can almost think of teachers in that same vein, is that we need to thank you guys more and appreciate what you do on a daily basis and all the crap you have to deal with and all the junk that you get. So we're super appreciative. From the school's side of this, what would you tell schools nationally that they can be doing better to ensure that we've got accessible, healthy, safe, and really high quality education for our kids?
Oh man, there's so much. When it comes to safety, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. I believe that we're failing our students in the lack of safeguards put in place at schools. I mean, we've seen an increase in school shootings. Why does every government official have protection, and our kids aren't being protected? As far as education, I think making a teacher's workload reasonable. I don't think people understand how many hours teachers have to work outside of contract hours in order to be successful at their job. That would increase job satisfaction for sure. It wasn't uncommon for me to bring hours of work home, because when you're in the classroom, you got to be hands-on with your students. So when does the planning take place? Outside of contract hours. So maybe more planning time for teachers would be extremely valuable. And then supporting them with the disciplinary issues. Let me tell you, when I went to private education, I was shocked when I sat in my first training and they said, "We don't want you dealing with disciplinary issues. You have a disciplinary problem, call the office."
Wow.
But I wasn't used to that, right? So I didn't dare call the office, because they were too busy dealing with so many other things. So I had to figure out how to deal with it in my classroom during my instructional time. But because the office, the admin, take care of the disciplinary issues, I am free to teach with zero disruption. That is why those students are growing so much, or partly a huge part of the reason why they're growing so much, because my instructional time is not getting interrupted. So that's huge. Disciplinary issues have got to be adjusted. You have inclusion students, which a lot of them they have IEPs because they have behavioral issues. In the name of inclusion, we send these kids right back into the classroom, because when they act out, they say, "Oh, it's a byproduct of their diagnosis." So because it's a result of their diagnosis, they get to come right back in the classroom. And I mean, you're talking students who are throwing chairs, who are stabbing other kids with pencils, who are cursing teachers out. They come right back in the classroom, and teachers are expected to teach in those conditions. So, I mean, that's huge. The disciplinary stuff has got to totally revamped.
Well, and I want people to understand what you were just talking about too. If you don't know what an IEP is, that's an individual education plan, right? Did I get those letters right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have a student and let's just say, and this isn't the case with all of these kids, but you have an unruly child and you say, hey, my kid has ADHD or my kid's on the spectrum and I want an IEP, essentially that's a plan adjusted and built out specifically for that child. And then the teacher has to follow that plan separately of how he or she is teaching and responding to the rest of the students in the classroom, correct?
Correct. And here's the thing. Like I said before, teachers are not behavioral interventionalists. They're given these IEPs with all these trigger words that you can't say. You have to walk on eggshells around this student. You have to try to control the class from saying certain words. They're all walking on eggshells around the student because when this student has an outburst, it can get really bad really fast. And I've seen it happen with my own eyes. I've seen students run away out of the classroom and teachers running after them. It's so it interrupts. Like, I don't know, as a parent, it would bother me that my students' day, when they should be learning in the classroom, they're spending it dodging chairs and pencils.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I'm glad that we are talking about all of these things because I don't think, unless someone's in the environment day in and day out, that they really understand the complexities of what's going on. But I think that's a huge issue, and it's clearly transcending into adulthood for a lot of these kids, that they're just never getting pushed back on this kind of behavior, and it's just going down a really, really bad path. Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation, Kristan. I can't thank you enough for coming on and just having a very open dialogue and discourse with me about what's going on in our educational system. You're just a champion. You and all the wonderful teachers like you out there, I want to just thank and affirm you because it's a really hard job, but we can tell absolutely clear as day that you care so much for these kids and you want to make sure they have the best shot at a successful future. So I thank you, and I hope that you will come on the show again, and maybe we can continue the conversation and get some updates from you soon.
Of course. This was so fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow along at politicallybasic.com and at politicallybasic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. We'll see you next time.